Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, depending on where in the world you are. And welcome to another, Testamo test automation meetup. So this is where. So let's see. So let's take it from the top. I'm Larry G. Yeah, I'm Larry G. So today I'll be your host, and we have two very interesting people on the talk today. We have his name slipped me. Give me 1 second. Let me get back his name. Yeah, we have Benjamin Biscoff, and we have Eril Jiva. If I pronounce his name right, then he'll just beat me up later on. All right, but so today, without further ado, what I'll do is say, so people who don't know me on this beautiful little circuit we're running here. Again, I'm Larry G. I'm the test automation and AI solution architect. Also, Classy JS core maintainer. That's a test automation framework. I, do keynote speaking. I'm ethical AI advocate. I'm an author, a mentor, and I contribute a lot to the open source community. Yeah, so that's me. And so what we're gonna do is give you a little insight into Benjamin. And then, before I go on with that, Benjamin will not be with us today live, unfortunately. He had an emergency, but he was kind enough to record his session for us. And so I will kindly introduce him beautifully, and then we will play the recording. If you have any questions, you can post them, and we will pass it on to him, and he will respond to them, all of them, as the case may be. So let's talk about Benjamin. Good guy, test automation architect at Trivago. He spent a lot of years as a developer and trainer, and then he decided, for some strange, unexplainable reason, to become a QA. Don't know why. I think he is a cutting for punishment, so he did that. So he is focused on a lot of back-end and front-end testing technologies and pipelines, and he even wrote a book writing API tests with Karate. And he does a lot of maintenance on projects, and he's also write a lot of blogs, and he also is a conference speaker like myself. So today, his talk is about karate beyond API testing. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Although recorded, but let's bring him in and let's see what he have to say for us today.
Welcome to this session about karate beyond API testing. My name is Benjamin Bischoff. I'm a test automation engineer at Trivago in Düsseldorf, Germany. I've been in tech for about 25 years, and after being in tech for 15 years, I slowly transitioned to the world of test automation and software testing. So that means I'm writing a lot of software to test other software. I'm responsible for test pipelines and a lot of things like DevOps, cloud technology, all around the testing topic. And my blog is at softwaretester.blog, where I write a lot about testing and software engineering topics. Also, I wrote a book about karate, which might be important in the presentation going forward, because I have a lot of examples that I've taken from this book and made available to you so you can experiment with it a little more. A little disclaimer first, I am not directly associated with Karate Labs, the creator and the vendor of Karate solutions. I'm focusing solely on the open source portion of Karate. I will also show a lot of code. It is all either Gherkin or maybe a little bit of Java or JavaScript, but that is basically it. I will also not cover the setup part of karate, which is usually really simple. They have a lot of tutorials around that. The purpose of this presentation is not to show you the basic core stuff that karate can do, even though I will touch on that at first, but to show you what karate might be able to do that you may not know yet that it even exists. Peter Thomas, the creator of karate, said karate strives to reduce the entry barrier to writing a test and, more importantly, reduces the friction to maintain a test because of how readable tests become. And that is actually the crucial points. The readability of tests is really, really nice, as you will see. So, what is karate? Well, it is based on the Gherkin syntax. You might know Gherkin from behavior driven development, that is the given, when, then syntax, where the given is the setup part of a test, the when are some actions that you do, and the then is the result and the assertions that you can do. Usually there is glue code necessary. That means code that connects the English language steps to some programming code, so those two can correspond, and you can describe in English what should be done, and then your code executes. It is not necessary with karate because all the necessary code is already in the framework. And also, this is very, very important. If you run a lot of tests, you have built-in parallel runs. So nothing that you have to add on to the basic framework later, but it is built in. And you have the Java and JavaScript interoperability. That means that you can extend the framework capabilities by using Java and JavaScript, but I will touch on that a little later. And everything is JSON. So when you work with data, especially native JSON data, this is supported in the framework, so you can directly interact with it, put assertions on it, and even if you work with other kinds of data like XML, this internally is represented as JSON, so you can use exactly the same assertions against JSON and XML. So let's go through the tests. At first, because this is karate's core thing, is API tests. And to show you a simple API test, I'm using an API that gives me a list of coffees. I will every time go through the code. I show you step by step, so hopefully it will not be too complex to understand. This is how a typical test would look. You have a feature file. This is a file name .feature. This is a collection of test scenarios, usually that belong to the same topic or business case. And then you have one or more scenarios in there. This is called pure API test, and this is how it looks. So to access an API, you use the URL keyword and then just specify the API endpoint. In case if you know the typical Gherkin syntax, this would be the given step. But here you can just use a star instead of the keywords, which make the scenarios much more concise. So this accesses the URL, and then you can specify a method how to access it. In this case, it's a get method. You can also use a post, a put, all of the HTTP verbs. And then we just print the response. The response is automatically available in this response variable, so you don't have to do any conversion. And then you can do an assertion on it. This is typically done with the match keyword, and here again the response status is automatically filled by Karate. So whenever you use a method on a URL, the response status is automatically filled, and if it's a 200, it's all okay. I can also show you this. Here is my test scenario that I just showed. I'm using Visual Studio Code here because VS Code has an extension. This is called Karate Runner, which is a free extension for Karate. Karate Labs themselves, they have a paid extension that you can use for VS Code or IntelliJ IDEA, but for the sake of using purely open source here, I'm sticking to the Karate Runner. So that gives you the run option above a Karate scenario. And when we run this, you see in the logs that it is successful down here. And you also see that we are getting the JSON response with the different kinds of coffee. And if you want to see that in a nicer way, not in the logs, we can check out the Karate report. And let me move myself a little down here so we can see that this test scenario was executed. It was successful. And here are the test steps, and if we now click on the response step, we see the same JSON response. I can also show you what happens if I make this fail. We expect a 500 response here, and I run the same thing. You see that we now have an error, and if I go back to the report, here now we have the response status 500, and we get an error message that is pretty easy to understand. The match failed, and that 200 is not equal to 500. So this is how a failed report would usually look. So what you can see here is that the method to describe the different steps for an API test is usually very, very straightforward and very readable. But we can go a step further than that. We can use UI-based test. And for this, I use an app, an online application called Coffee Cart. I can also show you how this looks. This is just a simulated shop for coffee. So I can just add coffees to my cart. And here I have my list of coffees. If I move myself up, you can also see that we have a total here. And this application I will use during the next tests. So let's start with the Coffee Cart API. And the Coffee Cart API is kind of an API. For this application, it uses a JSON. So here it is just the file list.json that I can also open in the browser, make it a little prettier here. And this is how the structure is for the front end. So this could also be API endpoints, also different endpoints that the site hits. I deliberately use the coffee card app because it's very straightforward to see what's actually going on with the data. So if we look at this in detail, we have the different coffee products here, and each coffee has a name, which is also displayed on the front end, a price and a recipe, and this is the different colored bars in the coffee cups that show you how much espresso, how much milk is in the different coffees. And also we have a base URL, and the base URL in this case is conveniently the same for the front end and the API. And this we can define in Karate's configuration. So in a typical Karate project, you have a Karate config.js, which returns a configuration object. This is essentially a JavaScript object where you can add any configuration parameters you want. So in this case, I specify base URL, and this is the URL of the application. Here in the comment is the local application. This is just a fallback in case the online version doesn't work. I could also deploy it locally, but luckily so far we don't need this. But whatever is in the configuration is automatically available in any tests, in any test scenarios directly. So let's go back here. And this is how the API test for this API could look. Again, we have a test scenario and the URL, but here we do not specify the base URL as the URL itself, but we use the base URL variable that is automatically taken from the Karate config. And because it is a /list.json, we can also specify a path. And path is again a Karate keyword to specify the path portion of the URL. And then it's exactly the same. We use a get method again. And here you see already the power of Karate. Again, the response is available in the response variable, but we can also just save it in a custom variable that we define. So here I say def products equals response. That means I take the response that I get and save it in my products variable. And this we can also print out again. So print products will give us the same JSON again as before. And then you can do matching on this response. So here I make sure that the first response from the JSON is an espresso by checking the name property. And here I can do some further Karate magic. It's using JSON path on the inside. So you can also use JSON path operations. So here I define the variable only the names and get the name property of every element. And this is automatically converted into an array of names. And then I print this again as product names. And to make it clear, I can also show you how that looks. So I'm running the exact same tests. And going back to my report. This is not the right one. Let me use the Karate extension to open the right one. And here again we have the JSON response as before. And here we have only the product names as an array. So again, it's quite straightforward. I mean, this syntax is a little bit special, but no rocket science. But if you use a JSON path in such cases, it's very straightforward. So you get exactly the data that you need. And this will come in handy a little later. So now that we tested the API portion of the website, yeah, I know it is kind of a basic test of the API. We could do much more with Karate, but for the sake of this demonstration, I decided to keep this relatively simple. Karate can do UI tests, and UI tests run in real browsers. So if you have used something like Playwright or Selenium or any technology that can work with browsers, you know the drill. And UI tests can either test the UI itself, so the different components and if they behave correctly, or it can also test through the UI. And this is more what we are doing. So we are testing data and the UI together, which makes a full end-to-end test in our case. And if we look at the site itself, how it is set up, the code, we can see that it has data test IDs set up. And this data test ID can be used to target the specific elements, like the headline of each product. And this is exactly what we need. Of course, Karate UI can target any locators that you want to use. We can use CSS, we can use IDs or link texts or XPath, whatever is best for your case. And here we can also target the total, and the total can be found with data test checkout, which is also very convenient for our tests. And let's go even a step forward and test the payment window, the modal window that opens up when you want to pay your purchase. And this can be found via a class, CSS class, which is called modal content. So now we have everything together to target our elements in the test. And this is how it looks. So again, the setup is exactly the same with the feature and the scenario. The only difference is that we configure a WebDriver. And we configure Chrome in this case because Chrome is most flexible. And if we don't want to test the UI itself, Chrome is a very good choice. Of course, if you want to test that a UI behaves the same across different browsers, it is necessary to also test on other browser engines. But you will also see why I'm using Chrome here. And this is using the local Chrome. Of course, it's also possible to run those tests against test grids or in Docker containers. And we're using the base URL again because, like you saw, it's the same for the API and the web app. And with the driver keyword, we can open the website. So this would open a new browser window with the base URL. And then we can target the elements like this. Here we use the click method to click on the element that has the data test ID cappuccino, as I showed you. So this will locate the element with this locator and click on it directly. And the nice thing again is that we can save those locators also in variables in Karate. So here I define a checkout button, and then I do not do an action on an element, but I just locate the web element with the data test ID checkout, which is the little checkout button that we have. And then I can run a matcher on it again, like on an API result. So with checkout button.text, I get the text inside this button, and I check that it's a total of $19. Yes, it's a very expensive coffee we have here. And because I have this in a variable, I can now also click the checkout button. Here I use the variable and then .click. Instead of using the click method with a locator, I use an element and click on it. And then, because this payment window will appear, I wait for it. I wait for the modal content CSS class element. And then I want to match the text of the first headline in this window, which should be payment details. And then I can take a screenshot. So it would basically be you click on cappuccino, and then we assert that it's $19, and when we click on this, the payment details window opens, and then we have the payment details headline. Now let's see if this works. And we should see that there is a browser window that opens quickly the application and then clicks through it. It's very, very fast. And when we look at the Karate report, everything is green, and here's the screenshot method. And when we open that, there is the screenshot of the final result. So we can even see, okay, the total is okay, the payment details window opened, all good. What if we want to combine those two? We want to combine the API and UI test now. This is not a problem. But there is one thing that makes it a little harder in this coffee card application. I can show you if we go back to the beginning and I click 3 different coffees. You see that now we get a notification up here. It's your lucky day, get an extra cup of mocha. So it's a promotion thing that we don't want, because the goal of the test should be to see which products are sent over by the API, and then verify that those products are actually displayed here in the front end. And I don't want to deal with this promotion thing. So we have to handle that as well. This is how the promotion data looks in the JSON. So we have discounted true, and we have the name with discounted in front of it. So those two things can point to a discount that is displayed after you put 3 products into the basket. So we could use both of those things to handle the discount. I will use the name in this case. So again, we open the URL and the list.json, which is our API, then do a get to get the JSON data. And then I use the same little JSON path trick as before to get all the names of the products in an array. And then because we have this JavaScript interoperability in Karate, I can just define a filter function that I want to use. Here I define the filtered product names function, and this can take the product names and filter for any product that does not start with discounted. So when I apply this filter, it will filter out the discounted products that I don't want for my test. And here I open the website again, the front end, and then I can locate all the elements that are a headline of the fourth order. And all those names like espresso, espresso macchiato are H4 elements. I checked this before in the website, so I can just locate them all. But this gives me the elements. That gives me the full elements. I'm not interested in the full web elements of the headlines. I'm just interested in the text portion. So here I can do another trick. I create an empty array called product names web. And then I can do a loop on the product's web elements. And for each of those elements, I use the Karate append to function. And append to, what it does, it takes an array that is already there and appends a specific value to it. So here I want from the product, which is the web element, the text, and I want the trimmed text. So if there are any spaces or white space characters somewhere on the front or the back of the name, I want to trim them away. So this only gives me the names that are displayed on the website, and the filtered product names gives me the names from the API. And then all I have to do is match those. So here I check if the product names web are exactly the product names from the API. So if I run this again, you see it opens the website, and before that it hit the API, and all is fine. So we have the exact same products from the API that are then displayed in the front end. If I do not filter the products here, let's just do that for a quick test. So if I, instead of filtering the products, if I just take the original product names, this is including the discount, you see it fails. And then you also see that the filtered product names and the product names do not match. And you can also see a screenshot which is automatically created in case of failure. And you even see that the lists are not equal because the discounted mocha is appearing here. Wonderful. So, what's next? Mocking. And mocking is very, very powerful, as you will see in the next example. But let's quickly go through mocking. And mocking means that when you hit an API endpoint, you do not get the real data back, but you get data back that you define yourself. So I took the real JSON response that we got before and I modified it. So we have only two products left, the beautiful morning that I defined and the sip happens. Excuse the puns. So I'm defining my own two products here. As you can see also in my test project, I have this JSON. And then I want to use this as a mock. And the very, very cool thing about Karate is that it has built-in mocking and it uses the same feature and scenario syntax for this. So what we have here is I create a feature that is defining my mocked data, my mocked response. And the @ignore tag in the first line signals Karate that this is a feature that should not be executed because this is not a test, this is a definition of a mock. Then I define the course variable. I configure it as true because this prevents any cross-site access thing that you might hit when you use a mock in a real website. And it has to be in a background in Karate to work. And here in a mock definition, a scenario means a little different thing because you can define conditions when some mock should be used. So this is not the scenario name, but it is a filter, basically. So we can define that when the path matches list.json and the HTTP method is get, then we should use this products.json, which is my own defined data, in case of the real response. And when you define the response variable like this, this is automatically used as a response by Karate. And the last one, which is a scenario without any filters, is the fallback. So that means that whenever I hit a path that is not list.json, I get a response status code of 500. So here I can then test this mock. And for this, Karate has a built-in mock server. So what I do here in this mocked API scenario is I define a variable, or in this case, it's not a variable, it's actually a function I define, which is called start coffee mock server. And with the Karate start method, I can just give it the mock feature. And when I start this later, this mock feature, I get a port back. And this port is crucial because we need this port to point our application to this port. So our goal is to run the real website with a mock that is running locally. So this is where I actually start the mock server with call once and then the start coffee mock server method that I created a line above. And then I point the URL to my local host with the port that the mock server is running on. So now I can do the exact same thing as before. I can test the API with a path list.json, method get, make sure the response status code is 200, which is okay, and then print the response. And then I do the fallback tests. So I use another path, in this case, whatever, with the same method get, and match that the response status is 500. So this might sound a little complicated, but once you try it, it gets really straightforward. You see that it is successful, and if we now look at the logs, you can see that here it's starting a server. It dumps a lot of code and initializes the server, and then you can use the mock server, and you actually see that it's running, in my case, on port 56605. And it actually works. And if we check the response, we actually get here the response that I defined before, which is awesome. But this is only part of the magic, because now we have a mocked API, but the goal is to use this so we can test that the front end is actually working correctly without relying on real data. And this is crucial when you deal with dynamic data on websites that you cannot really predict before, and which is not deterministic. So if you provide your own data source for a real web frontend, you know exactly what data is coming in, and you can run your tests in a deterministic fashion every time. So this is how it works. Mocked API and UI test. As you know, we can start a Chrome WebDriver, and here we do a little different thing. We start with a blank page because Chrome needs to be running in order to intercept future requests. So we run it, we open Chrome with a blank page, and then we can define driver.intercept and give it a pattern when it should intercept. So to keep it simple, I say whenever we want to request any JSON, please use our mock feature. And that is it. That is the whole thing. So with driver intercept, we can use our own mock. Then we hit the real base URL, and for demonstration purposes, I do a screenshot. And then I can try clicking on Beautiful Morning and zip happens, because the application is actually generating the data test IDs based on the data that is coming in, which is really cool for testing. And then I click on any element that has card 2. So I can show you, this is this thing up here. So when I start this application and I put 2 products in it, it says card 2. And with this abbreviation, with this syntactic sugar that Karate gives us, with the curly braces, I can find any element that has card 2. Click on it. I wait for the URL called cart. Again, I can show you when I click this link, the URL actually has cart in it. And then I check if the total, as before, the data test ID checkout is $11, because I made my 2 coffee products cheaper. So we only pay $11. And then again, I take a screenshot for demonstration purposes. So let's see if it works. So it should open the website with a mock. And we can verify this in the screenshot that we now have on the real website, which is available on the live URL. We use our own data, Beautiful Morning and Sip Happens. And later we have a total of $11 as expected. And we could, of course, run many more tests on the front end, go through all the products that are here and check if they have the correct name and the correct value and the total. But this is how far I wanted to go in this example. Now let's go to another discipline of karate, which is visual testing. And visual testing is essentially a screenshot comparison. So instead of taking web elements from the website and asserting different properties on them, you take a screenshot of the complete website or certain elements and compare them to baselines. So to images of those components or complete websites that look like you want them. And then you can detect if there are layout shifts, even if you have the correct data, because if you have large tables with data on the website, it might be quicker to just take a screenshot and compare it to a screenshot of another table with the data you expect. So you can see pixels shifting, and this is sometimes much quicker than going through the data step by step. So here you need a baseline image. So I took a screenshot of the website as I expected, and then I can use this baseline image to compare against a certain state of the website. So again, this is old news for you by now. We use the Chrome driver and go to the base URL. And then just to show you that you have different options on the driver, I set it to a certain width and height and a position of 0, 0, which is the top left corner of my screen. And then I click on the cappuccino. I take a screenshot again, but in this case, I save the screenshot in a variable because I want to have this available to compare to the baseline. And with the compare image functionality, I can use the base.png baseline image that I created before and compare it to the latest. And this is the bought coffee, and the bought coffee is my current image. So it's comparing. So this is my screenshot, and here is the image comparison, and it says the second image is 0% different compared to the first, which is cool. And you can even look at the image here. You can look at the baseline. You can have the slider here, which shows you the differences between the images, but it's exactly the same image. So let me not click on the cappuccino this time, just to illustrate what happens when it fails. There, it fails. And this is how it looks in this case. You see that in the div now, in the corner, we have this pink overlay of the pixels that are different. and it says the image is 0.17% different compared to the first. And we can also check this when we slide here over the total, that it is different, because in our baseline we expect that we have a cappuccino in here, but in our current state of the website we didn't click on cappuccino, so there is a difference. And you have multiple options how you can display this, and you can even go to the baseline image and define areas that should be ignored. But this could be a completely different talk just about this feature. And the last one I wanted to show you is performance testing. Because every karate test that you write can be used as a performance test as well. Karate has a bridge to the performance testing tool Gatling, and with minimal additional configuration you can take any karate test and make a performance test out of this. And I'm using Maven for my project setup. I'm a big fan of Maven. And this is what you need to use Gatling. Just the Gatling dependency, which is called Karate Gatling, which has the same version as the Karate version that you use. And the Gatling Maven plugin, which is used to run those Gatling tests. And this has to be pointed to a class which has the Gatling performance simulation, because you want a certain number of simulated users over a certain period of time that hit a certain API or a certain website just to test the performance. And this points to the API performance class that I will show you in a moment. This is this one, and this is all the code you need. This is just a Java class that extends the Gatling simulation class. And here you point it to a karate feature. You can also pick certain scenarios in a feature file, but here I just use the very first test I showed you against the coffee API. And then I set up a simulation. I use 100 users over a period of 10 seconds. And again, this could be a whole 1 or 2 hour talk in itself, just to show you performance testing. But I just wanted to show you how easy it is with how little code you can actually do this. And because this is triggered by a separate Maven plugin, we use Maven to execute the simulation. And I also created a separate Maven profile called Gatling that includes the dependencies that are necessary. So now we can actually run the karate tests as normal karate tests, or when we use the Gatling profile as a performance test. So for this, I go to my terminal and I trigger the test with Maven. And you see that the first time you use this, it downloads the dependencies. And now you see that this API is actually hit multiple times. And we have built success. And here in the logs, you have the results of the performance tests, which is very nice. and you have a separate report. And if we open this report in the browser, this is a Gatling performance report. So we see the number of requests, which is 100. We see the distribution along the timeline in the 10 seconds that I wanted. And we can see a lot of different information. If there were some responses that had a status other than 200, which is not the case here, so it's a pretty stable API. But you will see that if you run those simulations, that at one point you will have errors in your response, and this is a very good indication how much load your API or even your front end can handle. So yeah, I know that has been a lot in a short time, but this was not to make you an expert in all of those things. This was just to let you know things, features of karate that you might not know of. Because it is actually much, much more powerful than advertised. So, what exactly did I show you? I showed you API tests, I showed you UI tests, how you can combine API and UI tests, that we can do API mocks, that we can use those mocks in UI tests of real web applications, and that we can even do visual testing of UIs and use karate tests as performance tests. And you have seen that all of those things can be accomplished with minimal amount of code. So I have all of those examples for you in my GitHub. It's under Bischoff Dev, which is my GitHub handle, and then /karate UI, or you can scan this QR code and access all of this. Just try it out yourself, see how easy it is, modify the examples, create your own, and you will probably see that this can be of real use to your projects. So, thanks a lot for listening to me, and I wish you a great rest of the day.
Yeah, well done, Benjamin. And like I say, for everyone out there, Benji had a emergency, so he said in the recording. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna extrapolate all the questions that's asked, and we're gonna send it off to him, and he will respond to them. So don't so you won't be left out, and don't feel too heartened, when now that you listen to him and he's not here to answer your questions directly. And that was Benjamin. All right, so let's look at our next guest is Ian Jiva, and when he comes on, he will let me know if I pronounce his name right, so you have to pelt me to big stone. But he's an accomplished head of QA and test automation lead with more than many years, and he's looking into the areas of government, tech, oil and gas, digital media sectors. So you have done a lot. So um, as head of global QA and release management for a leading SaaS company, he spearheaded the QA transformation program that delivered measurable business impact. He included a lot of developing an AI-powered no-code automation platform that cut testing effort by 70%. That means he's going to tell you about it when he comes on, and if he doesn't, I will ask him about it later. So and you can see he spans a lot of the technology we use over the years. Selenium, UFT, LoadRunner, JMeter, Azure's, DevOps, and the likes. So his talk today is going to be in reference to RPA used in automation testing. So without further, let's bring him in and say hi.
Hello.
Is how do you pronounce the name?
That was close enough. Good attempt. But it's Eyal Eva, as
Yal
correct.
Eva. Okay, got
Geva.
it. Yeah,
All right.
awesome, awesome. Yeah, it's lovely to have you. It's been a while since I actually saw you around, so it's been a while.
Thank you.
How you been keeping?
I'm good. Thank you very much. It's
Lovely.
a lovely afternoon here in the UK. We have sun for 5 minutes. We'll see how long it will last. So,
I understand. I understand. Yeah, well, I'm gonna hand it over to you. So everyone, here is Iya Ifa,
yeah, close
and
enough.
he's going to be speaking today about RPA uses in automated testing. Over to you.
Thank you. Share my screen. Okay, here we go. So now you can see also my presentation. That's good. Just a bit, as already mentioned, I've been doing the automation in various forms and QA and test management and release management in almost 3 decades now. I started in what was green screens automation in Unix, AIX at the time, and moved into more UI front end type of tools like QTP or UFT, how it's now being called, and the rest of the HP or previously Mercury platforms, and obviously Selenium and so on. But there was always something missing. There was also always something that's oh, if I could only do that, that would have been make my life much easier. And it's always the things that come before and after the UI or the front end or the browser automation. And I think this is where the RPA or robotic process automation comes into place. And this is what we'll talk about today. We'll talk about the specific tool today, but in general, there are many tools that can provide similar results, and we'll talk about those as well. Without too much ado, as they say, let me just switch back to my right view. There you go. And we'll start. So, what we're going to cover today. So let me just wait for the switch to actually happen. Okay, so we'll talk about the fundamentals of RPA. What is RPA? What's its use in test automation as a general? We'll talk a bit about Playwright, although it's mentioned here as a subject. This is not really the focus of this. Playwright is another tool in the big repository for N8N or any other RPA tool for that matter. And we'll look at other names that exist there for enterprise RPA platforms, implementation strategies, some ideas on how to do that, using AI in the process as well. So I know there was mentioned one of the implementations that I've done for a client, SaaS client, was the conversion of manual testing through AI into automated testing. Now that everything comes with the pre-invest, we got 80% of the way, and N8N gives you that added layer to take you from point A to point B in a much more streamlined manner. So we'll look into that as well. Okay. So what is RPA? So as I mentioned, the RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation, and it's a technology to help you automate processes and not just software. So not just testing a UI, not just testing API, but from start to finish, automating a whole process. It could be, we'll talk about some use cases when we go through the presentation. And we'll also look at some very simplified use case. I'll show you how to build it. And that allows us to actually have a more robust and end-to-end automation framework. Now, it's working using API calls or any other means that you can actually have to interact with an application. it works with a lot of, there are hundreds and hundreds of integration points. We'll go through those as well, or some mentioning of them. Um, there are visual designers, to specifically the tool we're going to look at is N8N, and there are visual designers, and I'll show you how to use some of them. And obviously, with the enhancements that can be done with AI and machine learning, you can get much better responses and processing of your results and automation across the board. Continue. So, what are the core RPA principles? So, it's rules based. So, like anything that we run, anything that we write, what is automation, what is software, there are rules. If this happens, do that. If that happens, do this. RPA is no different. However, there are some flexibility that we can get with using AI in those processes to ensure that we have a more robust outcome at the end. Auditable. So we have an audit log of all the executions that we have in the application. So we know when it executed, what was the results, what did we get, what was the input, what was the output. So it's very good for looking at if you are interested in compliance and ensuring that whatever it is that you're executing, testing, or running, or whatever it is, has a reason behind it and it's logged. It is low code or no code. I'm saying it's more low code. I would say the limitation of there are limits to what you can achieve with no code, but with low code you are able to achieve a much more robust infrastructure, much more robust processes, and you can again with the handle the most basic things with no code. But we'll look into that as well. Non-invasive already touched. We are talking about creating or using APIs to interact with systems. You don't have to change anything there. You don't have to install any injectors or anything like that. It's scalable. So N8N in particular have a few tiers. It has also have a free tier, so you can self-host it. So it's an open source that you can self-host, and that gives us a lot of power. So I use my own server for these, and I'll show you an example of what we use. And with that, you can obviously do limited. I'm saying limited, but there are some limitations to the free instance, which, for example, it's sharing credentials between users and so on. But we'll touch on that when I'll show you the demo. Flexibility. As I mentioned, there are many ways to use this, and even if that integration point does not exist within N8N at the moment, and you have your own API or your own integration point that you'd like to put into a process, you can use that with just an HTTP request. So it is very flexible. You can put whatever tools in there, even if, for example, the AI or the machine learning module that you want to use does not exist there, you can use their API point to do the same. So in that sense, that is a very flexible platform. So RPA, so again, there is a lot of confusion, especially if you're not a professional that deals with the automation or test automation. And sometimes I'm sure you'll see it when you are doing your job hunting. When you put automation, you get all sorts of rules. You get automation where it's DevOps automation, and you get automation which are test automation. And this is where effectively these are the touch points between RPA and the test automation, which is also what we do at TechID Consultancy. We help people get the right rules in the right area So we do, and we'll touch about that as well later. But in that sense, if we look at the framework for RPA, RPA touches on processes, so it helps you automate many applications, not just the browser facing, not just your app, but anything that leads into the app. So it could be reporting after, it could be data creation or gathering of information before the execution is needed, even the creation of that. And it does that with, as we mentioned, with the low or no code. Where today most of the traditional test automation framework are browser focused, more of the web apps. But I'm currently consulting for a transformation of an SAP program, which obviously is, whilst it has a web interface, most of the things or a lot of the things that we need to or want to automate, we can't do during these type of transformational projects. So this is where APA has a lot of power. So RPA can help us do these automation outside the browser scope. Drag and drop is, again, for RPA, it's more visual, low code, as we talked about it. We all know that Selenium, Playwright, and so on require some knowledge of programming. Whilst you don't need to be an expert, it's good to know how to code. The maintenance around N8N or RPAs in general is more around the versioning for security rather than anything that changes with the API points, but it doesn't require that much of a heavy maintenance in that sense. And processes tend to run, and that's what's nice about it. So I'm sure some of you came across these. I know I get many of these in LinkedIn and others. Very robust automation processes that are being implemented. For example, automatic blog creation from gathering the information of what is doing well at the moment until the point that there is a blog posted in a WordPress site. All of this can be done with N8N, for example. And that goes down to the integration point as well, as we just discussed. So it allows us to be much more flexible with what we can do. What it's best for. So we know what I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Selenium, Playwright, etc. And this is where you want to put your testing logic in. So as in, this is what I'm verifying against. However, I'll show you a scenario today where you can actually use AI in that process. So instead of using a traditional automation. The learning curve. So it really depends on the persona, but I feel that with N8N, the learning curve is much lower because again, it's a low-code tool. It allows you to do more intuitive stuff than having to write code or go into details of defining objects and so on. And we'll see that later. So, benefits versus challenges. I'll start with the challenges. So it takes a bit of time to get into. So I know I took maybe 3 days to find my legs around it. When I started, I think it was about 12 months ago, when I started looking into that. And it takes a bit of time to get used to it. But again, it's nothing like learning Selenium for the first time or how to use that. There are some the error handling you need to think about your process. So we talk about best practices going forward, and therefore the handling or the unexpected scenarios is something that you need to make sure that you have thought about and catered for. There are dependencies on some integration points, on the versions of these integration points, the compatibility of those. So we talked about the maintainability, but again, it's nothing out of the ordinary for a software solution. There is a matter of specialized skills here, but I think it's again relatively limited compared to anything else that is automation related. Now, the benefits, you can schedule it whenever you want, but you can do it with any other tool, to be fair. However, it is the fact that you can schedule anything else other than just your automated testing that is the advantage of this tool versus other. So it allows you to have your test automation in the middle rather than and have it orchestrated throughout many activities. And we'll talk about some use cases later. So that's a good advantage there. It's the test coverage, is the process coverage that I've mentioned numerous times already. And it's about reducing the overall effort of the team. So it's not just, okay, I'm giving this to the automated testing team, and they can do that, and they will take 3 days to do this, and they will take whatever to achieve. It's around, but I need the DevOps guys to create an environment. I need to make sure that the environment is brought up or brought down. I need to set up the data. All these extra activities effectively can be done with these type of tools. So RPA allows you to look at the whole scope of your activities and automate them. And that is a great time reducer, an effort reducer in that sense. Faster feedback cycles, that's a generic advantage for automation. I mean, it's not specific for this tool or another. And this is something that you anyway get when you look at automated testing. And these RPAs are no different. So, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at a specific tool. It's called N8N, or some people call it Nathan for short. But there are other tools like Zapier or MS Power Automate, or Microsoft Power Automate. I don't know if any of you have experienced using those. There is Automation Anywhere. There are many tools that do the same thing in slightly different manner. I like Nathan. It's very popular. There is a lot of resources out there, and there's a very good community. Again, it's building the flow. The workflows are visual. We'll look at an example right after this. Or in 3 slides. The flexibility of the code, you can use many types of codes. You can effectively, especially if it's self-hosted, you can run Dockers in parallel to your N8N implementation and use different technologies, even if they're not necessarily supported built in by N8N. There's also a community that creates nodes. This is what they call these building blocks, are called nodes in N8N, that creates different nodes. So there is a Playwright node there. There is a Jira node there, which will show that we'll see the usage of it later. Integration with Google Drive and so on, and it makes interactions much more easier and friendly. AI integration is possibly the biggest advantage of these things, is that you can put, whilst you're putting your automation as an executor, if you like, in the process, you can look at AI integration as a matter of a tool to help orchestrate some of the decisions that are made throughout these workflows. And that gives it a lot of gravitas and a lot of benefits compared to other ways of doing automation. It doesn't have to be automated in a way or written in the code structure. It's a lot of the time it's about the prompts, as we all know, and it's about setting the right context and so on. And we'll see an example for that. But I think that N8N specifically is a bit more technical than other tools, in that sense that you can dive in if you want to, and you can go into a more technical adjustment and tuning if you want to, versus other tools like Zapier, for example. And we'll move on. So there are principles for implementing RPA in general. You want to start on a whiteboard. I usually do. I usually start on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard. What do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? And that goes down a bit to the challenges we discussed earlier. It goes. It's looking at, and we'll look at some common pitfalls at the next slide. But it's about ensuring that you understand the full workflow that you want that you want to implement, that you understand the integration points, that you see what type of data passes from one system to the other. It's not always trivial, and that's worth thinking about. Um, Mentioned here again, Playwright in a specific manner, but it can be any other tool to automate or to run your automation. It can be Selenium, it can be whatever it is. But it's important to make sure that we have these setups in that environment predefined. Again, you can even automate those with RPA. So having a sub workflow that we prepare this, destroy this at the end, and then you have a much cleaner environment that you can then back up, or then less cost on storage and so on. These are very helpful in some organizations that I've seen, and this is very helpful from a DevOps perspective. So there's no lingering environments running or being spin up forever. It helps reduce the costs of these cloud infrastructures. Error handling, it's very important, obviously, with automation, and with no difference with RPA. So RPA error handling is a very important aspect to take into account when you do your design and when you think about what you want to do and how you want to do it. It's what you would do with a failure. Do I send somebody a Slack message? Do I shoot an email? Do I raise a Jira ticket? I don't know. Depends on your flow. Depends on whatever you want to achieve. Reporting. So it's not enough to just look at the execution, because sometimes this is maybe a very important element to automate, is the reporting of the executions. So how do I present this? Who is it? Who is my target audience? All the very basic of this. So whilst we look at Selenium or Playwright, the test report isn't necessarily a business front-end type of report. RPAs or anything in particular can help you adjust these output that comes off your test automation infrastructures and present it in a much more business-oriented manner, which actually is meaningful information for the business. And it saves you a lot of time with you having to analyze these. Well, what does that happen here? What does that mean? And so on. Once you put these rules in place, this helps you achieve these targets. Feels like I'm going to need a drink of water in a second. I'll do it after this slide. And integrating with CI/CD. So I mentioned something that you can put in place is effectively looking at your cloud infrastructure and how you can spin on your environments and ensuring that it actually spins your automation after, destroying it at the moment and lowering the costs. I'll take a sip of water and then we'll continue. Okay, so there are many implementation strategies. This is just an example of something that you want to think about, consider, take into account. Assessment we already talked about. It's about review planning. Is whether I can, what do I want to automate? Okay, that goes without saying to every automation project you ever do or ever done in the past. Is should I automate it? That's also always a question that you need to ask yourself. Not everything is worth automating. Sometimes the effort for automation is much greater than the effort to do it to execute it 3 times a year. So it is something that you need to obviously balance and examine before you make your decision on whether you want to automate that workflow or that process. It's looking across systems. So not just I'm looking at this browser or this app, but it is what's feeding it, what the information is going, where it's coming, what are the other business processes that are dependent on that and enable that automation or tests run to happen. So this is where the assessment happens, and this is where you want to spend a lot of time. Do it right in the beginning, and design it correctly to avoid the issues at a later stage. Basic QA principles. And obviously, we talked about ROI. That's a very important point, right? Ensuring that we're doing it for the right reasons. Pilot. So pilot is always a good thing to do, or as we say, proof of concept. Can I actually achieve what I want to achieve? Does this system actually provide me the data that I want in a format that I want? If not, what are the mitigation points that they can put in place? Can I actually change the output with other tools, or revise it or amend it? Again, in the scope of RPA, in the scope of automation, in general, can I get the results I need? So this is something that will allow you to if you go through a pilot stage, you will actually identify this point. It's a very important point in your journey to automation of processes. And another element is scalability. So whilst me using my small server somewhere in hosted, it is great. You want to make sure that you can that you build processes that are scalable. So when all of a sudden you have to run 10 of them at the same time, or 30 times a day, they work. So this is something that you want to, again, establish to start with, or think about, at least consider it. How would you manage it? So as I mentioned, there is when you use the free version, so the self-hosted version, if you're a single person in an automation team, that's fine, you can manage. But teams tend to grow if there is a lot of work. And for that, you may want to actually have a shared repository of credentials and so on, which the free version doesn't help you. So, but then you can go into these N8N subscriptions, which are really, they're not that expensive. They're quite affordable. But this is something, again, that you want to take into account when you're doing your planning. Last but not least is optimization. So you run it once, you run it twice. This is, again, basic automation stuff. Also applies here. You monitor the performances. You make sure that it actually runs as you want it, when you want it. The behavior are corrected. It's a bit more about it's continuous improvement in a way, ensuring that you fix these. I have not thought about this. A type of case and so on. The best practices are, if we look at what, again, for automation in general, and specifically here, is about layered approach. So making sure that you are doing a smaller type of workflows, and maybe string them together. So helping you, that will help later with maintainability. So if you string a few workflows together, then if an issue happens, not everything necessarily breaks. So this is something that you may want to consider. It doesn't have to be this way, but some RPA process can be very complex, and you'll have hundreds of nodes, and it's not manageable to do it in one screen. Whilst you have a very big canvas, and I'll show you that in our demo, it's not very effective way to work. Modular design, I just mentioned it, right? You build some other components, and you fit and match, maybe reuse them at a later stage. And you want to make sure that we, as I said, look at more of a business process rather than just the automation bit. And it is who takes part at what workflow, and defining that workflow with them, and then string it all to a whole robust process. Common pitfalls. Sorry, pitfalls is something else. Um, Fragile automation. Again, best practices of automation is we need to ensure that we don't just in your automated testing, don't look at just automate selectors. Look a bit outside. There are ways today with AI. There are amazing ways to achieve these robust automation processes. We won't touch on it here, but again, if you would like to discuss this, this is a part of the services that my company offers. Tools pool. So making sure that you use the tools you need, not to use tools just because they're there, but try to converge and try to reuse some of the tools and some of the processes. And I'll show you some of this, maybe just a smaller example in our demo. Not maintaining. So that's usually where most automation projects fail, is about maintenance and not thinking about the maintenance costs and requirements when you actually do the design for the test automation. So the next slide is about the demo that we're going to do, or that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a bit on, I'm not going to build it from scratch. I already built it. Verified it works, but I'll show you a bit more in details on how you would have built it from scratch and how to start with anything. So our workflow is, I wanted to show you something that's a bit slightly outside of automation, test automation, but also related to it, and also show you the capabilities of integrating many tools together and bringing them together to a workflow that runs. So what we will do is we'll use a trigger. So every process needs to have a trigger. It can be a time trigger, it can be an action, it can be something changes somewhere. And what we will use in our demo is a Jira bug created. Okay, well, it doesn't matter now for the sake of the demo. It doesn't matter how it's being created, whether it's created automatically or manually or from another test that runs somewhere else. But when a Jira bug is created, what we will do, we will go and fetch our PRD, so our requirements document, and we will I stored it in Drive and Google Drive, and from that we can then examine it with OpenAI versus the PRD. Is this a real issue or not? If that's a real issue, we will ask OpenAI. In that case, you can use whatever you want there, but this is just an example to write the test cases to cover that case, because obviously if that's a bug, we missed it somewhere in our automated scripts before, so why not automate it? And ensure that we have the data for it generated, and gather everything that effectively we need to have a more effective playwright or automation framework. Now, with that, in the demo, we'll not see how this is running in terms of the playwright test created. There are ways to do that. It will take us many more hours to achieve that visibility here, so we're not going to do that. But like I mentioned in previous consultancy role that I've done, I helped them create or automate these manual tests into an automation framework that effectively does that. So there are ways to do this. We can discuss it in some other, maybe more one-to-one discussion. If it's not an issue, that's the other leg of the query. So what I want to do is to update the Jira. I'll just put a comment. This is not an issue because, and I'll move it into done. So getting it out of my scope. Obviously, you can choose to do it, send it to somebody else, do a review before it's closed. You can do whatever you want, but that's to simplify the process and to present to you the right demo. This is what we're going to do. Now, I need to find the quickest way to actually get off my presentation. So give me a second, and I will be able to actually show you the demo. So let me see. There you go. Okay, so now you can see with me the um, Jira instance that I created with my free subscription on Jira. And what we're going to do is, instead of there's a demo issue here. So look at that bug, because what we're going to do in order to trigger the automation is effectively clone that bug. I would have expected something to happen when I click this button, and assuming that nothing happened, this is a bug that, let's say that we raised manually for that matter, and I want the process to verify whether this is a real bug according to the PRD or not. So let's look at N8N now. So every automation process starts with a trigger. Here we have two triggers. One of them is manual, which is currently turned off because we have a Jira trigger. But in the Jira trigger, this is where you define, clicking it, this is where we define what's going to happen. Okay, this is the account details that I used with an API that I configured in Jira. You can do that easily. And what is the event I want the trigger to look for and to listen to? You can choose from all this list. Okay. So there's a lot to choose for. So this is where I said the opportunity and the way that you can, whatever you can achieve here is really endless. It's how good your imagination is and your planning is, and not so much you're less limited by tools today, which is something that I could only dream of decades ago when I started with this. So this is something that is very good and important to take into account. Then we will take the attachment, if there is one, because I would expect it to have one, because every good bug has an attachment to it, whether it's a screenshot or a text file. Then we'll go into the AI agent. Okay, we'll be using, as mentioned here, OpenAI. And we will look at the PRD. We will read the PRD from Google Drive. And if it's a real issue, we'll update it to Jira and we'll assign it into someone else. If needed, well, in this case, it's myself. But we'll change also obviously the status of it to in progress. And if there is not enough knowledge in the PRD, which is also a response that the AI agents can say, well, you know what, actually you're not telling me, and instead of it hallucinating, what I would like to get to is the point that it actually checks. If there is not enough information, then it will update this is what we talked about, error handling, right? So it's foreseeing what type of errors could happen and catering for them through the process. So if there's nothing, if it is a real issue and there is enough information, there's nothing for us to do. But if there is not enough information, then what we want is to add another comment into Jira, and ensuring that, which is what we do here, and this will be the end of the process. Okay, so I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will start by executing the workflow. So when we execute the workflow, as I said, this manual trigger is disabled, so it won't do nothing. But this can be a useful thing for us to test instead of if we don't want to make Jira dirty with different bugs. So we can start the process manually and reuse the same bug for our tests and so on. But what happens here, as you can see, we're waiting for the trigger event. So now I'll go here. And I will trigger the event by cloning the bug. Just close this first. Sorry, second. Let's go inside it. clone issue. Now, issue is unassigned. I'm the reporter. I want to include the attachment just for the cloning perspective. As you can see, this is still nothing happened here because I have not cloned the issue yet. As soon as I click clone, you will see the process starting to run. Assuming they actually listening to the right. Let's just see that it's finished. Okay, let's open it. Interesting. It does not listen to the right. Let me just see that I didn't change anything. Okay, sorry. I think I know what went wrong. But let me see that we are listening to the right node, into the right project. That's the joys of working with multiple Jira projects. Let me just verify that. I cannot help this without. Okay, yes, that's the right project. All right. We'll start again. Okay. It identified the previous. Okay, fine. Excuse me. This is the. Just zoom out in my browser. Obviously, want to. That's what happens when you sometimes use a Mac with a different mouse. So excuse my zooming browser. You know what? I will just start a new one. Don't know where the zoom button went. There we go. Okay. Going back to this, making sure that this is actually off. Okay, it's fine. And again, we will duplicate the issue. Going here. I don't know why it does that. Here we go. Okay, so as soon as the bug was cloned and created, when you are connected to the right system, you can see the workflow starts. So we're getting all the attachments and so on. There was an IA engine. We'll have a look at the details of the execution after it finishes and what conclusions it got to. Okay, so if we look at the duplicate issue, let's look at the backlog. And it's going to be the last one that we've executed. Actually, I can see also the other one worked, it's just we didn't see it. So what happened here is, as you can see, this is the original one. And in the original one, all we have is the attachment with the error that we logged, nothing else. However, after the execution of N8N with the input that we gave it with a new bug, what happened is that it added all these details. So it created effectively a BDD type of scenario that it added into it in order to test these capabilities or these errors to ensure that they're not returning. There's also some coding that it obviously tried to, but it didn't really add the actual website there. So I didn't give it enough information to write the whole script. But it gives us the bones to actually write the scripts and the implemented script that we need in order to retest this issue. and ensure that it doesn't happen again. Let's move on to N8N, and we'll dive into the details of each one of the steps. So if we look at getting the attachment, obviously this is just going into the Jira trigger and getting the information we need. This is the attachment, just helps the agent, the AI agent, with the analysis that it does. So effectively, what we said to the agent is assess the issue raised based on the PRD, which the PRD is something that we provide from Google. So the agent, AI agent in N8N has a few capabilities. You can enable many tools to it. So you can just click there. So these are the type of tools. You can use also MCP. So if you want to use Playwright as a tool for it to actually use, you can give this as available. You can also use memory when you do an execution, so it will save if you have to process things over and over again, or more than just once. You may want to use simple vector storing. There are a lot of tools, as I mentioned, that you can attach. This is just for an AI agent. These are the tools that are available to it to use. Many technologies are being, many companies are developing integration points into N8N. So there's a very extensive list of integration points. But what we've used is Jira. So if we look at what we've done here, so what I've asked Jira to do is, this is a tool available for the AI agent, is to actually move the ticket that was raised to done if it was rejected. However, it was not rejected, and that's the other option that I gave it here, which is, as we can see by the green tick box, this is the option that was executed. And what happened here is that we changed the version to in progress, and we added the details into the ticket. Now, we'll also assign it to a person and change the version here. Now, what's great about the stringing of these, and this is how it's done in N8N. If we look at this example here, this is where you can see all the previous steps and the output that came from them. So all of it can be JSON, it can be a binary, it can be whatever it is that came, and you can reuse it into the next step in order to create the output or the process that you need. So it's about, we talked about it earlier, ensuring that you integrate the right elements and ensuring that you have the right data coming from one system into the other in order to make the right decisions going forward. This is where obviously this has not happened because there is the issue is valid, because that's the output from the AI agent, and therefore they didn't have to do anything with it. So what it did is change it into in progress. However, it also created the tests and the features that we've asked it to do. So if we look at the prompt, our prompt is based on this PRD and the issue described, whatever issue that was created. Again, you can look at previously the previous output from all the process that you run. So it doesn't have to be the one just that came before it. So you can also string other ones. And then look at what is available to us and reuse it in this process. So here I asked it to go to the Jira trigger, which is this one, the first one, and look into the issue description. And based on that, create the list of test cases. Again, this is a very simplified prompt. I would never use that in production. It's way over too simplified. But this is something that just presents to us and shows us the capabilities of such tools. Now, this is set into an inactive. However, when you set it to active, you can set it to be active to always listening, to listen only on a schedule, between 8 to 5, all the time, always run every 5 minutes, run every 10 minutes. It really depends on how you want to process this. So this can be something, if we're looking at this process in particular, this can be something that you can do, every 5 minutes, every hour, every whatever you think is right. in order to ensure that we have the right processing of the issues that are raised in Geo. Again, that's just a simplified manner of that. With that, go back to the presentation. And then we'll see if we have any questions. This, excuse me, just go into presentation mode. Let's have a look and make sure that you can actually see the right thing. Yeah. All right. So we've just seen the demo and how it runs. Use cases. So we talked about some of it, so I'm not going to go into too much details. I know we are about 10 minutes from finish. So end-to-end testing, so creation of data, automating the full scope of the process. Again, what I showed you with the Jira example, there could have been another process before that feeds into this, which is what creates the bugs in an automated manner as well. So your automation scripts can create the bugs in an automated manner. This workflow will assess if it's a real bug. If it's not a real bug, track it down. If it is a real bug, well, I would even do it in the first place, right? So you do the assessment even before you raise the bug, maybe. And that will even make your process way more efficient. So there are many ways of doing that. Hundreds of ways of skinning a cat, or 12, I don't know. And we can combine, as I showed you, AI capabilities in it. There is UI testing that you can put in it. There is API for sure that you can run with it and help enhance and create a more robust process. Obviously, when you look at regression testing, this is again how it fits into our usual or our more traditional automation processes. So when you look at regression testing, you can have a process that workflow will spin up an environment and spin it down. So automate your setup and tear down, not within the scope of automation, but within everything that surrounds the automation. That could be even data gathering. That can be reporting creation. We talked about that earlier. Cross-application testing versus just cross-browser testing. So cross-browser is something that you can manage within your automation framework. However, if there is data that needs to be pulled from one environment, from one application and pushed into another as an input or for processing or for reevaluating and so on, that is possible, as we've seen in the demo. We have only 2 more slides left, so try not to go over time. Future trends, well, the future is already here. As many of you see day in and day out, AI, machine learning is something that it's changed the way we look at things, changed the way for us to evaluate things. And we've seen that in this example where effectively I can, instead of having the BA or the product owner review the bugs with whether they are correct or not, that's a huge time saver for them. It's in the PRD, then that is a bug. If it's not in PRD or I don't know, it goes into the I don't know, and it assigns it to the BA. So this is a very effective workflow that you can put into place and saves a lot of time from the business. And as overall for the teams, it's we talked about, right, the low code, the no code testing framework. This is something that really helps us. You see, it's really defining the inputs rather than writing code. So there isn't much code. There is writing prompts to an AI. There is defining the input from a JSON, but so it does need some technical capabilities, but you don't have to become an expert in that sense. It helps. It helps because you can do things way more effectively and more efficiently. It's about IoT is something that we haven't touched about in this presentation, but it allows us to, because we can automate things outside our scope of browser or application, we can look outside our world that is virtual. And this is where a direction that I've seen happening with these type of tools with RPAs. So decision making which drives something in the real world, order milk, for example. Um, I think that's it. And as well, it's getting started. We already talked about it. I already talked to the presentation. I don't think we need to go into it. But this is some of the resources that are available for you to look into and consider. And just so if there is any requirements for you to do any automation, I am providing this consultancy services, also recruitment for those type of roles, and I'm happy to assist. So thank you very much. I don't know if we can hear you. I can't. Maybe others can. Nope, not to me, but maybe again. Let's hope that everybody else can. Let me put myself on mute, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Now I
Yeah,
can.
you can perfectly perfect. All right. Thanks for that. Very interesting. But I have a question. Is to do with I'm kind of thinking. What is you say is design test flow in N8N? What exactly is N8N for my?
That's the tool that we saw. So the tool that we saw that actually manages the workflow and sets that data to move. That's an event. That's a tool.
Okay, so that's the tool, and it's all modular design, so you could
Mhm.
create reusable components and then use them in different flows. One aspect of that would be, say, like visual bits of it. Is that
So,
correct?
so, so I can tell you about the. So I have a few websites that I run just as a side gig, if you like,
Uh-huh.
and for me to make sure that the WordPress the automatic update did not break anything. I have Visual Compare. So I have an N8N workflow that runs automatically, takes a screenshot, compares it to what it was before, and make sure that it's still actually the way it's supposed to be. There are like nodes like browserless, and now there's also an AI browser that can be added into the mix. So there are many capabilities, many ways of achieving this today.
Okay. And my final question on this side is about here you mentioned as you was going along that the RPA processes could be very complex, and it could be really hard to run within one, like say, one batch or one sprint, as the case may be. So how do we deal with that, and two, what would you recommend, and how would you tell people to avoid that?
So firstly, as we mentioned, it's about planning, right? Is ensuring that
Mm.
you plan your workflow in a modular manner, something that you can reuse. So even today, when we look at the basic automation, I'm spinning an environment, I'm deploying my code, I'm running the automated test. All of this, each one of them is a workflow on its own, right? So spinning the
Okay.
environment is a workflow. Deploying the code is a workflow. Running the test is a workflow. So by thinking a bit in a more modular manner, you can then decouple these type of dependencies and write them as separate workflow, but then combine them together with the appropriate trigger, like we did in the example that I showed.
Okay, yeah, I get that. So you just break them up, and then you run them
Bring them.
continuously. So yeah, so you get the whole thing done. Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, very well done, very well done for that, and thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a
It's a
great day.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you guys for all the people listening. And like we say, like I said at the start, if you have any questions for either of our two candidates today, you just drop them in the chat and we will ensure that they get them and they will respond. So without further ado, thank you so much again to testmatho.io for everything that they do for us. And so we'll see you guys in, let's see, we in September, October, November. The next run-in test automation meetup will be in November. And you guys could do what you normally do, sign up and come and enjoy free of charge, all the industry leaders that we bring for you to take stuff from. So thank you again to uh, testomat.io for your support. And we see you guys again next time. Bye. Have a good one.